Hello, everyone. I will call the City Council meeting to order. Deputy City Recorder Raimundo, please call roll.
Council President Hu,
Here.
Mayor Lube,
Here.
Councilor Shaw,
Here.
Councilor Singh,
Here.
Councilor Wolf,
Here.
and Youth Councilor Nog. Thank you.
Thank you. If everyone will join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Councilor staff, any non-agenda items tonight?
Nothing from us, Mayor.
Okay. All right. Seeing none, we will move on to public comment. If you would like to call us for public comment, the number is 503-966-4101, and those wishing to comment now should get into the queue. Anyone present wishing to comment should sign up at the public comment form at the front of the room. Assistant City Manager Nyland, can you provide follow-up to previous public comment?
Thank you, Mayor Lube. We did receive one comment at the January 24th council meeting. The comment was about parking. Specifically, the community member wanted off-street parking required for all development. A response was sent to the community member on January 26th. We explained the 2020 governor's executive order, which focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We will continue to encourage people to learn more about this important issue, what we are doing as a city, and what community could do to help address climate needs and meet our goals. That's my update for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. For written public comment today, we have received 3 messages. One of them from Matthew Martini, and it's regarding public and street safety concerns in residential neighborhood. Steve Holgate, Tigard action on climate change, and Alan Smith, ideas for improving Tigard's environment. Deputy City Recorder Raimundo, has anyone signed up to speak in person today?
No, Mayor.
Thank you. Network Administrator Thornburg, are there any phone callers in the queue or any requests to comment by video?
None at this time.
Okay, thank you so much. We will now reconvene as the Town Center Development Agency Board for the next item. And this is the first time counselors are switching out their nameplates. All right. Thank you so much. Redevelopment Manager Farrelly will present this item, and I welcome the Town Center Advisory Commissioners to please come on up.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Sean Farrelly. I'm the Redevelopment Project Manager and also the liaison to the Town Center Advisory Commission. And I believe for many of you, this will be your first time sitting as the board of the Town Center Development Agency. So when you work on TIF-related activities, you reconvene as a different entity. And the dedicated volunteers who advise you on TIF district information are sitting with you tonight. And we have one of our members online. And next slide, please. So Tigard has 2 TIF districts, tax increment financing districts. And they're shown there. That's in brown, we have the city center, also known as downtown, and the larger one is the Tigard Triangle. And the TCAC makes recommendations on TIF district policy, budget, and implementation. And next slide. So tonight we have I'm making my introductory remarks, do introductions, and then the Town Center Advisory Commission will go through their report from last year and then go over their goals, their draft goals for this year. So I will turn it over to the chair of the commission, Tom Murphy, and we'll need to share the mics, and also when it's your turn to do the slide, you have to say next slide, everybody. And you press the button.
Thank you, Sean. Mayor Lube, Council President Hoop, members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to meet with you. In your capacity as the directors of the Town Center Development Agency, you set the policy for a multi-million-dollar enterprise, and you oversee its performance. The shareholders are the citizens of Tigard. It's transformational work. The impacts will be felt well into the next century. The Town Center Advisory Commission exists to support you in that role. We did some things in 2022. We intend to do more this year. We've organized our goals into 3 areas of emphasis. For each area, we'll look back on last year's accomplishments. These were reflected in the TCAC's annual report, which was part of the council packet, so we'll keep that fairly abbreviated. And then we'll also we'll present our proposed goals for 2023 for each of the areas of emphasis. We'd welcome questions and comments as we proceed. And we also hope to have time at the end of the presentations for further discussion. Turning to our first area of emphasis, next slide, please.
Mr. Murphy, can we actually
yes,
do
ma'am.
introductions and get to know everybody?
Sure. To my left is Amanda Sharp. Mandy is one of our new members on the TCAC.
Can we have them introduce themselves, please?
Sure.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Mandy Sharp. I am a new resident of Tigard, and I just joined the commission in 2023, and I'm happy to be here today.
To my immediate right is the Vice Chair, Adrian Hinckley.
Thank you, Tom. My name is Adrian Hinckley. It's my second year with the TCAC, and I resident and also business owner here in Tigard.
I'll do it. The man who needs no introduction, but we'll give one anyway. I'm Travis Diskin. I'm owner of Curiosities Vintage. I've been on this commission for 1 year, and I think I've got one more to go.
Bob Tomasovic, I have a new member on the board, and I've been a resident of Tigard for 40 years, and I decided to get involved finally.
Great. And I believe we have, is it Mr. Thornburg with us remotely? Or who do we have?
That is correct.
Justin Watson is the other member of the TCAC who is appearing remotely.
Okay. Mr. Watson, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, Council President Lube. Appreciate you guys for having the TCAC here tonight. My name is Justin Watson. I'm an ex officio member for the Town Center Advisory Commission, and this will be my 3rd year. I will work with a number of businesses and nonprofits within the city of Tigard and throughout Washington County. So thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Thank you for the introductions.
Justin will address our affordable housing and houselessness area of emphasis, both the retrospective for 2022 and also for the proposed goals for 2023. My only quibble with Justin is that he moved north of the Columbia. He was too valuable for us to lose, so that's why he's our ex officio member. Justin, are you ready for the next slide?
Yes, Tom. All right. So the affordable housing and houselessness work goals. So as you can see here, we are looking to advocate for stakeholders. And by that, we mean to learn the needs, identify the opportunities, and minimize constraints that exist within each district, and refer to existing studies and assessments where appropriate. And so the City of Tigard has been working on affordable housing for a couple of years now. And so it's very important for us to assess the assessments that have already been done, the studies that have already been done, and then also talk with those stakeholders. So whether that be businesses within Tigard or citizens of Tigard or residents of Tigard, that is what we're looking to do with that. We're also looking to make recommendations for specific programs, innovations, policies to city staff and city council that directly affect and support or encourage the development of the development and preservation of affordable housing forms in the city of Tigard. So focusing on the two TIF districts is what we do, the downtown and the Tigard Triangle. But we look outside of those two TIF districts, still inside of the city of Tigard. A major example is the new development that was brought in that took care of a lot of the missing middle housing and offered some more affordable housing forms for folks at that 80% area median income. And so we're looking at those projects in order to inform ourselves on other projects and recommendations for developers, but also for the Town Center Advisory Commission to recommend to the TCDA and ultimately the board, or the City Council. My apologies. So finally, we'd like to support the City Council and private entities' response to houselessness. So that's really important when business stakeholders or residents of Tigard are feeling a certain way. We want to gather that feedback so that we can give it to the individuals doing this work. For example, Just Compassion is a group that does this work directly in Tigard. And so some of our accomplishments in 2022, we formed a houselessness work group of 3 TCAC members and worked diligently throughout the year. We also were able to make a recommendation for $1 million for Reach Community Development, which is going to help bring in a lot of apartments there in the Main Street area of Tigard. And then we did bring in as a work group Just Compassion, just so that CEO of Just Compassion can talk to the TCAC and inform us on what his struggles are, where he's at currently, and where he sees his vision going in the next couple of years. And unfortunately, the houselessness group, it takes years worth of work because there's legislation that has to change, or there's new policies that have to change. And, we have to make sure that we're advocating for the vulnerable consumer as well, which would be the person experiencing houselessness. And so finally, TCAC members, they do attend the chart meeting. And so we're looking to support the city and city staff in any manner there. So next slide, please. So I have gone through the areas of emphasis, and I've also covered a couple of our desired outcomes for this year just in talking. But to call those out, we'd like to meet with local specific housing organizations more than just Compassion, because there's things that they are doing already, and we just need to figure out what are those things that they're doing and how can we support them so we're not remaking the wheel. And so that way, we also can make the proper recommendations in order to lay the groundwork to be able to bring in houselessness forms and or more affordable housing forms in the city of Tigard. And so we also look to continue to support funding requests for affordable housing, and that I see coming in a variety of different ways, especially with the new proposed budget package by the new governor, bringing in, I believe, $32 million. Excuse me if I'm wrong. That's fairly new. And so we're just going to look at what the TCAC can handle capacity-wise, what we can reasonably recommend, and then act on those recommendations. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Justin at this point? Mayor Lou?
I would just ask in general, and I think maybe this is directed to the city manager, in regards to their work with houselessness and our new, and Kim Azell. I assume that she will be working in partnership as an individual who's going to specialize in this area, just to make sure you know that you also have a resource here on the city teammates as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The partnerships are what's going to make this successful, and obviously the individuals in front of us are going to be a key part of that as well. So it's part of CHART in other ways.
Okay. Yeah. Director Shaw.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. You had mentioned in the 2023 goals, I believe you're going to be meeting with local housing organizations. I just wondering if you had an example or one of two of those, who that would be.
So we will be meeting again with Just Compassion, and we will be meeting with the Town Center Advisory, or sorry, the affordable, Community Partners for Affordable Housing. They are working on a couple streams within their organization to see if they can go into houselessness, that immediate houselessness. And so another portion of this, as I said up earlier, is the studying portion. And I believe that is also in our goals. And so part of the study that we are going to do with the work group this year is we're going to form a list of organizations that are doing this work, because a lot of this work is really new relatively. And for example, if someone has pallet pods in a parking lot, let's say the movie theater's parking lot, for example, and they set up in the evening time, and folks come in and sleep, and then they break down in the morning. Well, there's legislation that has to be facilitated by an organization doing that houselessness work. And so what we're going to do is look for those organizations that are sparking up throughout the city, or throughout the city of Tigard and Washington County as well, but also throughout Oregon, in our surrounding areas like California and Washington, because it's important to stay informed on what works in other areas so we can bring that in. And again, we're just really big, at least I am, on not remaking the wheel. We found some success with that 2 years ago when I first started with the TCAC. And so I've just been trying to keep that form going so we can be more successful.
No, I think that's wonderful, Mr. Watson. I would also add, and last week, I don't know, the weeks are all running together, maybe a little bit before that, we started working on our council goals, and we have a very specific goal around houselessness and creating transitional housing. And I think it would be wonderful if we could work in partnership as an advisory group to help us as far as directions on what that looks like, the different types of transitional housing. But I certainly don't want to step on any toes. We're still finalizing details and working with the city teammates to lay out specific goals. But I do want to say that that's something that this council has prioritized as one of our goals, and it's very specific. But it would be wonderful to partnership with you on it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll look forward to that.
And just a quick follow-up to Mayor Loob's comment with Kim Zell and her being the program manager for strategic initiatives. And she's done a lot of that pre-work too with regards to pods and other community organizations that are working on the houselessness, but also affordability for housing. So it'd be a good opportunity to coordinate. Thank you.
Perfect.
I apologize. I don't want us dominating the conversation. Are there any other questions? Okay. Wonderful.
I did want to add, Director Shaw, that Kim Azell has already reached out to me. The most recent CHART meeting was after the January meeting of the TCAC, so I haven't reported this to TCAC yet. But Ms. Azell, of course, was involved in that meeting, and immediately after that meeting reached out to further the conversation and learn more about TCAC and how we can work together most effectively. I believe that council's decision to restructure how those positions were to be utilized was extremely wise. I think that having Ms. Ezell on the policy level is definitely a wise step. Also, in regard to your question about houselessness agencies that we would work with, I believe that it's highly likely that we're going to be in communication with Family Promise in the very near future. If there's nothing else in regard, at this point, in regard to the affordable housing and houselessness area of emphasis, I'll turn it over to Adrian Hinckley. Adrian is the proprietor of a business in the Tigard Triangle, and he'll address our efforts in 2022 on the front of equitable business development. Adrian?
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for having us today. So if we could just go on to the next slide, please. So equitable business development, I'll just read the areas of emphasis. Advocate for affected stakeholders, learn about and research the needs, identify the opportunities and constraints within each district to better support equitable business development. Support the implementation of multi-language resources by city staff, recommends specific programs and policies to city staff and TCDA that directly affect, support, and encourage equitable business development downtown and the Tigard Triangle. So I was very involved in equitable business last year, and I'm going a little bit off of the cuff here, which I hope I don't live to regret. But we had two big events, two major events, and one was a workshop for downtown businesses and also Tigard residents. And we invited them to come join us, and we had a workshop where the goal was to learn more about what businesses and residents would love to see in downtown Tigard and also the Tigard Triangle. And it was very geared towards eateries and drinkeries, and there's a reason for that. We wanted to know what is it that they would like, and here we found through a series of fun games and questions and the program, we found that our residents and businesses are really looking for uniqueness in businesses, local, quality, healthy restaurants and eateries, and also kid and family friendly, right? And I think local was a very specific thing, and in that we have an opportunity to have the support of small businesses that may have already been established in other areas within Portland and Oregon, and invite them to Tigard, or also help start up small businesses here in our community. So parking and safety was the second area of emphasis for them, and customer service and cleanliness, obviously those were important. And walkability was also highlighted, you know, to have an area where the families felt like they can come with their their dog, their family, walk around, enjoy the city. And throughout the workshop, one of the really cool things that we did was we asked them, based on these criterias, give us a list. Give us a list of businesses and restaurants that you know of, that you visited, and whether it's in Portland and Oregon, maybe in Seattle, in other areas, and we have a really cool list of businesses, and it's a nice long list. So we'll get into that list a little bit more in the future of the presentation. But so that was really fun, and it was really cool to see this, everyone get involved, and I think everyone felt like they were contributing to the direction of the city, the community felt, and that was really cool to see and really cool to experience for everyone. The other thing we did was we interviewed neighboring cities, specifically Beaverton and Lake Oswego, and really had a conversation with them on their approach for equitable businesses and small businesses. And what we found was that there's two approaches. One is what I called more proactive approach, and the other was more of a reactive approach. And so Beaverton specifically, and we all know that they have more resources, but they really got proactive with it. And they were able to hire specific, I can't think of the word right now, but consultant, thank you, a consultant that came in and said, listen, start with eateries, start with restaurants, start with drinkeries, and then you build a community around that. And I think we've all seen how successful that's been. And so they really put forth a recruiting effort, and it was extensive. It involved sending out welcome packets, it involved follow-up calls, it involved invitations to come to the city, tour the city, see what we have available. It was pretty immersive program, and I think it's been proven very successful for them. To the point now where, based on my conversation, they're saying, look, we have too many restaurants in city and drinkeries that want to come into Beaverton, and now they're changing their focus quite a bit into smaller boutique businesses, right? So.
Did you tell them to send them to us?
I did. I'm working on it. We are
Thank
working
you.
on it. So that was one thing. And then Lake Oswego had more of a reactive approach. And they have more of a mentality of, if we build it, they will come. If we build the nice buildings, if we build the nice areas and have some nice spaces, the business will come. And that was a different approach. I think it's effective for them. I think that they have some fairly high requirements and standards that they admittedly said that it kind of kept other smaller businesses from being able to be part of their community, because it was just, their standards were expensive. The entry level was too high. At the same time, the businesses that are there stay there, and they have a very good program in terms of retention. You know, if they find that a business is having some issues or struggling in any way, they're going to reach out to that business and they're going to figure out how the city can support them so that they don't lose and they don't have turnover within the city. So two different approaches. I think that it's for us as a community and as a city to really figure out which approach we would like to see. I think that Beaverton's approach is been very successful for them. Dynamic, exactly. So we're really hoping that we can share with you in the next presentation that Travis is going to share with you, and have the support of the city and city council and staff to have more of this proactive, dynamic approach. So with that, I'll turn it over to Travis, who is going to talk a little bit about the goals for 2023 on equitable business.
Thank you, my friend. You got it. I just want to add to his presentation, because I was part of all the things that we did in that sub-work group, that we really did a thorough quantitative or qualitative study with this group, the people that we talked about for restaurants. And we have what I consider very good data from that, even though it's not a lot of data. It's only, I don't know how many people were there. Yeah, in the 30s or so. We have a lot of good information from them, and that's usable not only by our work group, but our community partners and decision makers within the city. And I also wanted to add a personal reflection on the Beaverton program, because my business used to be in Beaverton until those changes started to happen, and I can see the long distance plans that they've had for that one area being the area of restaurant, the restaurant area and district, and also what they've done, what they're getting ready to do on the opposite side of Canyon Drive there. And they've put a lot of thought into that development process, and they're working with community partners to do that in their downtown core. I forget what the name of their downtown association is. I just wanted to say that when it comes to proactive versus reactive, I don't feel like our city has really either of those kind of programs. So whatever we can put resources into, I think would be really helpful. And coming out of this, one of our recommendations was to look at city staffing, and if we have the resources to bring somebody on and to make really big movements. I feel like 40 hours a week put into our TIF districts would yield way more results than we could ever accomplish just with a volunteer group and city and the current staffing levels at the city. So if you want to see all these things that we're putting into downtown come to full fruition, like Universal Plaza, the redevelopment of Main Street, Green Street, Phase 2, the way to do that is, the time to strike is now, is to get these ideas in place now so that we can take advantage of almost a blank canvas and what you want to see for your downtown, at least in the, as far as the downtown goes. Triangle's got its own really unique and interesting challenges, and we're going to look at that next year too. But yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Travis. I appreciate and excited and probably lean a little more towards proactive in, trying to attract a diverse set of new businesses. And I guess, Sean, to you, that kind of recommendation, I'm assuming that you take the Commission's recommendations into your budget planning as we just have started this process. So, okay.
Yeah, that's right. And we are making a budget request for another staff person because there's one staff person working on all these projects in 2 districts. You might want to, is that the next slide? Did you
Next
address
slide?
that? Yeah.
Oh, I think another question?
Oh, sorry.
Maybe a comment. To me, maybe as a newer council member, I think a combination of proactive and reactive would be appropriate, because if you are trying to actively recruiting business to an area that's not attractive, I don't think that will work out too well. So maybe a combination of both, looking at improving our overall facility and infrastructure, and then attracting new business at the same time. And to me, as again, as a newbie, is maybe the information's out there, maybe we're working on it, but it's just, for me, the frustration part is I don't see an overall comprehensive plan for the downtown. So maybe it's there somewhere, but it just seems like instead of working at piecemeal, maybe we need to look at everything together, and so we can work out a more effective solution. So thank you.
Thank you. I agree with that. Sean could probably speak to the current plans a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, we're working on implementing the TIF district plan, and we have a 5-year work plan that we're working off of. And then on a more comprehensive level, there's the Downtown Reimagine project, which is kind of looking more at more big picture, but things that can, if adopted, could push things in ways people want to see.
So now my presentation. So I'm going to talk about the 2023 areas of emphasis. The first one hasn't changed. The language is the same. Advocate for affected stakeholders, learn about and research the needs, identify the opportunities and constraints within each district to better support equitable business development. That's a huge catch-all, and it really caught a lot of the things that we did last year, and with specific emphasis on downtown and a plan for that, what the best plan would be for that. We've added 2 new areas of emphasis. Review and make recommendations on current parking plans for both districts with staff. Develop a plan that accounts for growth in these districts. This is something and this isn't anecdotal either. I'm sure that everybody within this hall continues to hear that word parking come up more and more and more. It was the first comment today, and it probably won't be the last one we hear this year. So I think it's important to take a proactive and reactive approach to what is the plan for parking other than a laissez-faire approach, which isn't currently working for a lot of the businesses, or a rapid development approach for the downtown core. So we want to come up with ideas and give that some energy this year. Another one is to develop non-conventional business opportunities, such as co-ops, food cart pods, maker spaces, business incubators, etc. These kind of non-conventional businesses really can spark change within a district. They tend to breed like sorts of businesses. They tend to, as an example, within my own business, having 65 small businesses, I've had in the last 3 years, 5 of them incubate into their own storefronts. And so the more of that we can see we can support, the more we can have those people get on board at their grassroots level. And so from that, our desired outcomes are within the first area of emphasis. We really want to continue the work group, the work that we did last year, and then continue to pursue those recommendations that we've given to staff and to this group. We want to explore sources of funding for programs to support new and existing businesses that don't always qualify for TIF funds. There are a lot of barriers for somebody who maybe has, $30,000 in their pocket. They want to start a business. They got a dream. If they want to open up a drinkery or a restaurant, system development charges could eat that up in seconds. And then we want to find ways to help people that are a little outside of just the city's grant programs. A big portion of what we want to do this year too is to start to work on what we're calling a stable table process of working with community partners like the Tigard Downtown Alliance, the Chamber of Commerce, and other people who are around to really say, why don't you take this one and run with it, and we'll take this one and run with it, and everybody do what's best, what they're best suited to do. And so that starts with conversations, which are starting in earnest now to develop plans for the rest of this year, both for us and our recommendations to you, but also for the Tigard Downtown Alliance and the Chamber of Commerce and their business partners. And then we want to make recommendations on creating separate work groups for the 2 TIF districts. I think it came up last year that a lot of the stuff we do is good for one district, not as great for another. So maybe we should start to at least have that conversation if the 2 TIF districts have unique enough needs to where they need a different set of recommendations for them, that one size isn't fitting all. So that's something we want to look at this year and keep that in mind with every decision we make. We want to start with reviewing the survey responses gathered in 2022 in relation to our parking studies and our parking survey, and continue fact-finding in the Triangle with a survey for that district as well. We need to understand the needs and advise the TCDA on future parking projects. And then we want to brainstorm possibilities and speak to business types as listed within the areas of emphasis, and explore what incentives will attract these kind of businesses and investments in our TIF districts. Thank you. Sorry, I just read it all.
No, I think it's incredible how much you all have done and what you're continuing to do. Does anyone have questions or comments? Oh, yep.
Great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. You had mentioned continue to work and advocate for effective stakeholders, and probably echoing Council President, who I'm assuming that's your current business owners and perhaps even some of the issues that have impacted their business, whether it's just the general economics or houselessness. So I assume those are part of your effective stakeholders?
Yeah, businesses definitely are, but we also want to keep in mind that it's not just the business owners, but our stakeholders. And one neglected one, which I'm personally going to be working on, is our property owners downtown, building a list and making communications with them so that so we understand better what they want what's going to incent them to make the better decisions on who they put in those places. That's outside the scope of this, but that's in answering your question. We have a lot of different stakeholders, including the people who live down there and the people who travel through, and there's a lot, but definitely the businesses are the ones that are going to help us spark some revival for downtown.
And I also would be supportive of whether it ends up being a consultant or staff. We'll certainly leave that to the staff to decide, but I think that would be certainly helpful if we're going to have more of a proactive approach, particularly as it's our annual comprehensive financial report where we report 41,000 residents from neighboring cities commute into Tigard each day. So we want to capture those folks, we want to capture those dollars. So look forward to hearing what is also reported back from your review of the parking survey, and also looking forward to working with you on funding. I think there's a lot of opportunities out there both at the federal and state level, so thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, Director Wolf.
Great presentation and excited. My question is kind of that big goal. So if wildly successful in 1 year and you report back, what would that look like? Help, as a new person, help me set expectations of if we had support via consultant or staff assistance, what do we think we could accomplish in a year?
Good question. You got an answer to that one?
Travis, you told us in Leadership Tigers that you're always making plans.
I know, I got them, but I mean, we're a commission.
We're going to accomplish quite a bit, and I think that bringing in some small businesses, some local businesses. I know we already have some great things happening with the food carts that we're going to have at Universal Plaza. That's just a small example, a big example, but we can build on that, bringing other small businesses, recruiting other small businesses to come into the area, and really revitalizing downtown Tigard and Tiger Triangle. So in terms of, what does it look like? I think it looks like having quite a few more eateries and drinkeries in both TIF districts.
Or hopefully committed on that way.
And I would say within 1 year, what we would want to see a staff or something produced with that much resources put behind it is really a definitive list of the actual businesses, not we want an ice cream place, but we want this one, this one, this one. We've called them all. We've said, we've got the perfect place for you. We've already talked to the landlord. That sort of really people-powered, face-to-face phone call, or meet me here sort of work, which just really can't always be accomplished with emails and postcards and things like that. So really dialing into, we have the list of actual restaurants people would love to see down here. We have a list of, what we don't have as much of is a list of the landlords that would host those new businesses and what those landlords really, what their motivations are.
Sure.
And that's going to require, people power in a way. And so that's what I'd like to see them accomplish also, is a map of all of the lots in this town and their phone number you need to call to get in there. Because we're going to have, once Green Street's done, there's a lot of empty storefronts there, and more will be empty before it's done. I already know of 3 businesses that are leaving that area because of a combination of efforts. That's maybe where that reactive program that Lake Oswego has comes into play, where you can say you're struggling, has a little bit to do with some of these projects. Maybe we have something in place to help. I know the TDA has tried to do some work that way, but somebody who has feet on the ground with these people and knows the business owners' names, would probably have a different effect on getting some support to those businesses.
Okay, excellent.
Thanks.
And Sean, I would really, with the council president, the 5-year plan, I couldn't find it when I went online. So if you want to send a link or a PDF, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, will do. Just wanted to point out just one opportunity for this particular emphasis that hasn't been mentioned, is that the TDA will be hiring a full-time person for the first time. So it's a really great partnership opportunity.
One other quick comment. Travis brought it up, but I just want to make sure to emphasize that in the approach of being proactive, part of that system means connecting with the business owner. A lot of times our business owner, or I'm sorry, our landowner, right? The property owner. And a lot of times the property owner may not even be in the state. So to them, there's really no, as long as the rent's being paid, it doesn't matter if it's a salon, it doesn't matter if it's a restaurant, it doesn't matter what it is. But if we can help together, help them understand the vision that we have for the city and eateries and drinkeries, then we need to get their buy-in in terms of property owners. Because it's a property owner, and it's also the leasing agents that they hire. And we can really need to join a partnership with them and help them understand that vision, and that's why it's pretty comprehensive work. So,
just to connect one dot there, why we have the idea of non-conventional business opportunities is precisely because we have empty storefronts. Those non-conventional business entities are much more fluid, able to pivot into an empty space and say, I'm going to be in here for 3,000 square feet for, for 6 months until you get that restaurant that's ready to go. Then we'll move over to this 5,000 square foot space and do retail there for a while. The more connections we have businesses like that, the more agile our business and shopping environment will be downtown. So that's one element that will link to that. Like I could probably fill another 10,000 square feet with shopping space right now, but until I know the business, the property owners and everything else, we've just got to have that laid out.
So I'm glad you brought up the topic of landowners. Are there things that the city can do, either a carrot or sticks, to make the landowners more engaged and be more interested in the future of downtown? Or
I think you'll have a recommendation in a year from us, as far as what's after we have that contact and we know a little bit more about them, even if it's not with staff, if it's just with volunteers, we're going to find out what's going to motivate them. And I do think it's going to take both, because a lot of people are just fine with a write-off on an empty building. That would be nice, but and some don't. So we've got to come up with a series of this is what we can do to make this work for you, and this is what's going to happen if it doesn't, and not in a punitive way, but in a way that gets them to understand that their actions have consequences for people on the street here.
No. Thank you very much. In the realm of Council President Hu's carrots and sticks, how about carrots? When we attract businesses, and they might be impacted, whether it's by construction or houselessness, is there an opportunity to have some sort of program in place that'll help defray some of those costs? I know we do so for attracting new businesses, but do we do so for current businesses that are here?
Well, we do have a matching grant program that is available, and in fact, we're focusing on the area that is undergoing Main Street, Green Street Phase 2. And we have that carrot, and in fact, have been talking to a business person who was interested in moving into one of those spaces, but the property owner and this prospective business owner couldn't come to terms, even with that carrot. So I think property owners are kind of an area that we need to focus on, because we can't force property owners to take businesses, right? We can provide a grant, but I think communicating with property owners what the vision is, how it's going to be good for them and good for the business district as a whole. If you attract a good tenant, that'll attract other good tenants. I think we've really seen that on the southern part of Main Street as a result of the Main Street, Green Street, and I think when Main Street, Green Street Phase 2 is done, I think you might see something very similar.
So perhaps just to follow up on that, so if a business is currently in a location they want to be in and the landlord wants them to be there and they're impacted by some of these circumstances that happen, is there a program that helps defray some of those costs?
Well, to improve their business, yeah, we can't, I don't know if you're asking about paying for lost business during construction, is that where you're?
Yeah, not necessarily lost business, but if there is some sort of impact where, let's say, their business had been there was no parking in front, or there was a big, huge construction truck in front of their business, and perhaps even if damage was done to the front of their business, or in the back behind their business, if there is houselessness, individuals that are on their property, the landlord's property, but that also is impacting the business, whether it's they're having to pay for cleaning services, or, and a whole host of other examples, but.
Well, there was a lot of questions there, but if there was any direct damage due to construction, I mean, that would be addressed by the contractor. Our grants can improve the buildings, the storefront. We don't really pay for cleaning per se. That's not a TIF eligible expense. And by the way, there will be a tax increment financing District 101 training next week, so we'll get into a lot of what urban renewal and or TIF can and cannot do and pay for. But yeah, so I think some businesses plan ahead. They see, construction is going to impact my business for a while. Why don't I make an improvement to my business so when it's done, I'll have a nice, attractive new storefront, and we'd like to see more of that happening.
So perhaps, I know it's not part of the TIF, but maybe that can be a future discussion too, because I know that even just cleaning outside of a business can be a huge impact, whether it's tents or items left behind, or just, again, utilizing the area as a bathroom. But thank you. Yeah.
Can I get a clarification? Are you asking for a recommendation on a retention program for businesses, or more of a emergency assistance fund or program, or both?
Travis, you read my mind, both.
Okay, got it. We can cogitate on that and come up with recommendations.
We've had some, do you have something? I was just going to say, we've had some wonderful, robust discussion, and one of the questions that I always like to ask is, one of them is definitely you're advocating for a staff person in the next year to really work on these districts. What else do you need from us in order to be successful?
Are we still talking about the equitable business?
It could be anything on the table. What do you need from us in the next year to help you be successful? I'm sorry, does that feel like a grenade? That's not intended to be.
No, not at all.
Well, I could kind of add some context to that. You already mentioned that the council is going to be working on their goals for houselessness this year. I think that when the council gives some pointed, directed places that they want to see us go, that really helps out a lot. And so not only in the affordable housing and houselessness work group, but I would hope that maybe you could look at our other goals and maybe provide some pointed direction for those goals as well. Even if it's just one area where you would like us to go, that would be really good.
Thank you, that's helpful. And I will say all of the goals that we discussed, our 4 council goals, all of them were almost check boxes, very clear, very specific, and it's kind of a yes or no whether or not we've accomplished them, which was very important to us. But if anybody has any, thinking about it on the fly, please speak up. But Mr. Murphy?
Actually, in a way, you anticipated my conclusion, because my request to the board of the TCDA is to retain the question of how can the TCAC best support you? What can we do to assist you in maximizing the benefit both to the districts and to the city from the TIF districts? I think that the equitable business development discussion illustrated very well what I view as kind of the dual functioning of the TCAC. Yes, we can provide input and recommendations on matters on which TIF dollars can be spent, and those purposes are important. They can be transformational. They're also pretty limited. you know, essentially no programmatic dollars. Can pay for city staff to support the TIF districts, and other than that, it's what I like to call dirt, sticks, and bricks. It's got to be permanent improvements to real property. Okay, so that's where the dollars can go. But there, when we're talking about restaurant recruitment, for instance, that isn't so much dirt, sticks, and bricks. That is what I view as the second kind of informal function of the TCAC, and that is advocacy for the districts. We want to be your eyes and ears and boots on the ground for the TIF districts. So if there's something you want us to go after, look into, inform you about, please let us know.
Yeah, Director Wolf.
So, because I think to follow up from Justin's comment, and so thank you for that, Tom, Commissioner Murphy. I think I'll step back to homelessness and affordable housing, and I think that is a big priority, and I think a lot of the housing concerns and strategies around whether that's affordable housing or some of those partnerships with Just Compassion or possibly Family Promise. But I think, I'm sure you're all well versed that there's multiple needs when it comes to those that are unhoused. And so even kind of more fully understanding all those kind of pieces, how it impacts downtown. And I know there's multiple groups that address some of the downtown needs. So I want to be mindful of TIF's roles of this particular group, but I think it's something that we all need to work together and be mindful of what those strategies look like. So.
Any? Okay.
May we have the next slide, please? Thank you. Kind of a tough act to follow to transition to connectivity and transit because, quite frankly, as our 2022 annual report reflects, we didn't do very much on this area of emphasis last year, not at least that is measurable. The goal had been carried over from 2021 largely as a placeholder against the possibility that somehow or another the West Side Light Rail project might somehow be resurrected. That hope has faded. We are looking at issues of access and transit in the TIF districts somewhat differently now, and I'd ask Bob Tomasovich to describe where we're going with this area of emphasis in 2023.
Well, thanks very much, Tom, Mayor, and Directors. Pleasure to be here. I mean, I've got, I was trying to figure it out here. I think I've got about 18 days of experience on the council, so I'm speaking with a lot of knowledge, but let me give a shot at it.
Next slide, please.
Yeah, next slide. Thank you. Okay, so let me start with the title there. It was connectivity and transit. We really think we now need to be looking at access, as Tom mentioned. Light rail is not going to come in, and so let's take we're saying connectivity and access as maybe a better focus for us. As he also said, the priority, the first three are the exact same from 2022. I don't think we've got it in the right priority yet, so we're going to look at that a little bit more to make sure that we have it in the right priority. But nothing new there, so I'm not going to read those to you again. We added a fourth priority, and that's develop wayfinding means for the public to utilize within the two TIF districts and between the two TIF districts. So what do we mean by wayfinding? Literally it means somebody being able to take a look at a map, at signs, at terrain, and decide how they want to find their way to a destination. So if we look at access between the two districts, if we look at access within each district individually, how can we better assign each, point and allow people to meet at, be at a certain point and say, gee, I want to go find that ice cream shop. How do I get there? What are my means? Can I walk? Can I drive? What if I want to go for a longer walk? Can I see this on the way? That's what what we mean by wayfinding. And so it's within each of the districts themselves, and then between the two districts. Signage is one methodology. Another one might be a simple app. I mean, we all got apps on our phone that say, Google, how do I get to this address? So a simple app that could be developed and potentially put on the Tigard website, or even something we could put on the phone. So those are the kind of things we'll be looking at for walkability. Desired outcomes are, again, to support the city's goal to obtain funding to improve and take ownership of Hall Boulevard. We know that that's going to be a priority. Look for other opportunities in the triangle for pedestrian improvements. I think there's a lot of just finding out how, and I've actually been looking at Google Maps from the air, 3D, to just look at how could I walk from Lowe's over to a business in downtown Tigard, and I'm not sure there's a way. I mean, you could go up, you could come down Hunsaker. There's lots of ways, but so how can we develop some different ways to do that? And taking, improving an ownership of Hall Boulevard is important. Other opportunities in the triangle for pedestrian improvements, and I think I just referenced that, and the city's grant request for 72nd Avenue improvement. Welcome to please ask me any question I can't answer.
You're very knowledgeable for 18 days. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, Director Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's fortuitous that we have Dave Roth, who's a senior transportation planner, who is in the room, who could probably work with the commissioners and with us to look at those opportunities, including, and I see Emily as well, but multimodal solutions that'll help assist, whether it's going to be e-bikes or scooters potentially, or even car sharing. We'd like to see them be electric vehicle car sharing, but I think those are opportunities. So excited to be working with you all on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. I own an electric vehicle, so yes, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, the connectivity is the pieces that allow us to get, it connects us all, and the infrastructure to get there, and it's so important, I think, to us, or at least to me, looking at the different ways, not just in our cars, how are other ways that people can get around, everything from, electric bikes to individuals who may need to other assistance to get around. So, no, thank you for your work in this area. Any other questions? Oh, yes. Director Singh.
Yeah, thank you for that. I would continue to encourage looking at language access as well with wayfinding. I think there's some cities that do really well, including different languages and Braille. I think when I walk downtown in Beaverton, they have excellent signage, wayfinding. So I feel like that's a great recommendation, and to continue pursuing that and researching that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for that comment. That's a very good point. Thank you.
We aren't done with the process of setting guideposts for our work in 2023. Mandy Sharp has extensive experience in strategic planning. She organized and led the retreat that yielded the proposed goals you've just seen. I've asked Mandy to describe our next steps in this process. Next slide, I think.
Next slide, please. Thank you. So I feel I was voluntold for the role of facilitator for the strategy sessions, but in part because I'm new and I'm new to the community. I have a set of fresh eyes. I've lived in lots of places across the United States, But also because I have many experiences, as mentioned, in strategic planning, parts of my career where I've had to do this. I really felt, happy that I'm able to help with this process. And when you're new, you can look at it with fresh eyes, so it works out to facilitate. So as you've heard from other commissioners today, we've invested a lot of time thinking and brainstorming and communicating and discussing. And we have done that around goals, objectives, and desired outcomes for our advisory commission for 2023 and going forward. And as a summary, we have documentation, as you're seeing a summary of that for each of the areas of emphasis that lead us to continued rewritten goals. And we have determined that the 3 areas of emphasis will continue with modifications. And we actually incorporated a potential 4th area that's really about systemic change within the commission itself and how that impacts how we act. So a lot of the comments you've been mentioning today, asking questions, and even the responses right here, I was taking notes because we are right on track when that idea of a 4th leg of the stool, so to speak, came up. Really, it's a look at a systemic change for the organization, and it incorporates a lot of what you were asking about. It talks about equity, it talks about inclusion, it talks about a relook at who's involved on the commission, who's invited, who's teaching us things, how we're learning those things, and how we organize ourselves so that we can accomplish the goals of the commission in a timely manner with enough emphasis within the capacity that we have. And that phrase came up as a kind of a guidepost for ourselves. Do we have the scope? Dirt, sticks, and bricks. Do we have the capacity? What can we achieve? So we employed a structured strategic planning process, and you can see it. It's come out in this presentation. I'm very excited about this. First, we discussed and learned about the prior goals, and that's really helpful with so many new or brand new members. And then we identified opportunities for improvement for future goals in the documents that we used themselves and in the goal setting process. And then we met as a small group to brainstorm, review, and put form to our next steps as a full commission. Then we completed the full review of our main areas of emphasis as well as our potential 4th area. And that 4th area we decided to be, as I mentioned, systemic culture change within the commission. Not that it's something that's required of us, but that it is going to produce better results if we think about that in everything that we're doing. These areas of emphasis, as you know, are the equitable business development, access and transit, connectivity, and 3rd, housing and houselessness. And we will be focusing on organizational improvement, revision of operational processes, and efforts toward a greater inclusion. We defined the areas of emphasis, which are the what, and have developed a final draft version of our actions to take, which is the how. And now we'll be moving to the desired outcomes, timelines, milestones, and measurements. And that's where you take a deep breath, because those are, again, capacity. How much can we actually do, and what are we going to measure? Throughout the presentation, it's been clear that learning and understanding has been critical among our commission members, along with collaboration, partnership, and understanding. You're hearing about asking others, learning from others who are already doing these things, finding out what the right way would be to not reinvent the wheel. And as the mayor has mentioned, we share the goal to incorporate the city's strategies and goals that are coming forward so that our strategies align with those goals. That's where you get superpower, and it really works. So as you know, with the number of newer members, we have new interests and ideas, and we're committed to creating measurable outcomes for this plan, including regular progress checks and, to be honest, reality checks, to ensure that we're on target for our goals or in a position to revisit the goals. So our next steps, again, are desired outcomes, timeframes and milestones, and measurables. Well-defined goals focus people, budgets, and resources on the right things. And as such, we're going to explore a definition of success or outcomes. What are those measurables? Quantifiable pulse on our progress. Document focus to apply resources to specific results. So yes, you're hearing what we'd like to do, but what is it specifically? What does this look like in a year? And achieve specific targets. A friend of mine used to say, a person with no target hits his goal every time. So we want to make sure we have specific goals that we're aiming at. And we hope that this leads to an established framework for accountability that can be used and reused in the future. Minimization of subjectivity around our goals, which can happen, is kind of mission creep. You think this is good, and then, well, what about this over here? Well, we want to stick to what our goals are and hit those targets. And potentially most beneficial, because many goals seem to linger without an ability to know if they're done. Measurements to understand when we hit a target and applied an effort, and we can say we reached that end. It doesn't mean it's over, but the goal can be measured, so you know it's reached the end. So there's a lot of big ideas, and I will continue to remind my fellow commissioners of the capacity and scope comment that came up probably a dozen times in our meetings in one way or another, as well as what we want to celebrate, sort of those two things together, in the effort to create performance indicators. And this may include objectives that fit into financial, process goals, learning and growth goals, and community and business member service goals. What is it that we want to see in those areas? As this work is potentially most vital to understanding our strategic plan and goals, these efforts will require time. So we aren't there with those measurables, but in really 2 key meetings, we achieved this. 1 small group meeting and then 1 main commission meeting. So I'm really confident that these small groups, the experts now in each of the legs of the stool, are going to be able to take that information and create several measurable outcomes that we'll be working on. So it's going to take us some time, but that will lead us from discussion to documentation and then to implement these and help advise you and celebrate with the community when we've reached success. So that's my wrap up. Do you have any questions about that part of it?
I know that we've used more than the I know that we've used more than the time that was allotted for this portion of your meeting, and you have other work to do. Are there any other questions or input you'd like to interject before we close?
I just want to thank you for your service to the city of Tigard. The amount of work and care, you are the reason that I love this community, and I think we're all working hard to make it a wonderful community and the kinds of communities that we want to live in, and we want everybody to be here and welcome and thriving. So thank you for that. It takes a lot out of your personal time to give back, and I want you to know how much we appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for being here in person. It's lovely to see you. And if anybody needs a Tigard pin, I don't have any, but we can get you some. I noticed some we're wearing. We're happy to slap you with branding. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I can bring some tomorrow to your meeting.
I'll wear it next time, I promise.
Thank you, Mr. Farrelly. Okay, we will reconvene as the City Council for the remainder of the meeting. And next on our agenda, we have the Regional Transportation Plan update with Senior Transportation Planner Dave Roth. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Lube and Tigard City Councilors. I'm Dave Roth, Senior Transportation Planner. Do we have my presentation ready? All right, next slide, please. So, tonight I'll be providing a briefing on the Regional Transportation Plan update, and we'll be seeking a motion from Council to endorse Tigard's draft RTP project list. Metro, the Portland Region's MPO, or Metropolitan Planning Organization, is in the process of updating the Regional Transportation Plan. It's updated every 5 years. The plan guides coordinated capital and programmatic investments in all form of travel, motor vehicle, transit, bike, ped, trails, freight, so on and so forth, over the next 23 years. It's important for Tigard's regionally significant projects to be included in the RTP in order to access some state and federal funding opportunities. Next slide. The RTP contains a long-term vision for the region's transportation system. You can see that on the screen here. Goals and supporting objectives and performance targets to indicate plan process. Policies that guide decisions and actions in pursuit of the plan's vision and goals, a financial plan that identifies how the region will pay for investments, and an investment strategy that includes major local, regional, and state transportation investment priorities to achieve the vision. This is not dissimilar to our own local transportation system plan, the 2040 TSP, which was recently updated and adopted in January of last year after a 2-year community engagement and planning process. Next slide. So where are we in the RTP update process? The timeline in front of you illustrates that we're at the approximate halfway point in the overall Regional Transportation Plan update, and the update must be completed by December 6th of this year. More specifically, as indicated by the green circles there, Metro and agency partners have wrapped up the revenue forecast and have initiated the call for projects. So 2 things that I'll be talking about throughout the presentation here. Next slide. So as I mentioned previously, the RTP includes a financial plan and an investment strategy based in part on revenue assumptions developed at the local and county level. During the fall of 2022, Tigard Community Development, Finance, and Public Works Engineering teammates coordinated with staff from Metro and Washington County to develop a local and county-wide revenue forecast for the RTP 2024 to 2045 plan horizon. Sources of revenue that fund our transportation capital needs include vehicle registration fees collected at the county level, gas tax, both county and local, and state gas tax, which gets funneled through the county, transportation development tax, transportation system development charges, Tigard tax increment financing programs, which you just heard about previously, and anticipated state and federal grants. For the purposes of the RTP between 2024 and 2045, we can reasonably assume anticipated revenue of approximately $265 million, and this is considered the financially constrained amount, and it comprises the near and late term dollar figures that you see on the screen here in front of you. A third category, the strategic or unconstrained amount, includes additional priorities that advance local and RTP goals, but whose estimated costs don't fit within the assumed plan horizon revenue projections. Based on guidance from Metro, the unconstrained revenue amount is equal to the combined near and late term revenue assumptions. So basically you're just doubling the constrained list, and that gives you the unconstrained or strategic list amount. I'll mention this again later, but you can think of our revenue assumptions here as guardrails around how many projects we could actually include in the RTP. Next slide. Now that I've covered the RTP revenue assumptions, I'll move on to the call for projects. Like our own transportation system plan, the RTP includes a list of projects that are prioritized for implementation. The policy framework for the 2023 RTP update guides the development of the project list. The RTP uses an outcomes-based approach such that projects included must support the overarching vision and goals, which we saw earlier. It's important to point out that cities like Tigard are required to work closely with counties, in our case, Washington County, and county coordinating committees, the WCCC, the Washington County Coordinating Committee, to develop their draft RTP project lists. This is work that Tigard teammates have been involved in over the past several months. At its February 13th meeting, the WCCC will formally approve the Washington County and the cities of Washington County draft RTP project list. So that's next Monday. This approved list is what I will use to enter the projects into the RTP project hub before the February 17th deadline. So the next week and a half, I'll be doing that work. Local agencies are required to endorse their project lists no later than May 24th of this year. Next slide. This image provides a snapshot of RTP activities that will occur between January and August of this year. I'll draw your attention to the call for project submission period that we're in now, the assessment and system analysis that'll be conducted by Metro once all of the projects are entered into the hub across the region, so that's March to June, and then the continued engagement activities and review opportunities occurring this spring and summer. So that green bar represents engagement that will just be continuous, and there's several touch points with Metro Council and the Joint Policy and Advisory Committee on Transportation, JPACT. So we can go to the next slide. So tonight, as you read in the agenda item summary, I'd like to take a moment to review what's being asked of council tonight. So in accordance with Metro guidelines, Tigard teammates are asking council to make a motion to authorize teammates to take all actions necessary to complete steps 1 and 2 as described below. Step 1 being by February 17th, 2023, submit a letter from council to Oregon Metro endorsing Tigard's draft project list. And step 2, make any needed refinements to Tigard's 2023 RTP draft project list in response to the project assessment and engagement period that will occur between February and May of 23. I'll just pause here and say that that date of February 17th was a little bit ambitious, and it's fine if you would like to change that date. The actual deadline's not until May 24th. So if you want some comfort in changing that date, that's fine with me. Next slide, please. Now I'll get to the most interesting part of my presentation tonight, and that's our draft project list. That's why you're all here, right? First, as I mentioned before, our proposed projects fall into 3 categories: near-term constrained, late-term constrained, and strategic or unconstrained. I also mentioned that our revenue assumptions are like guardrails for our lists. For our constrained list, we are allowed to include projects with a total value in line with the projected revenue. It's got to be close. We can't be way over, and we shouldn't be way under. We have a little more flexibility with our unconstrained list, which is why you'll see the total project value exceeding our unconstrained revenue assumption. One thing I need to call out here is that project costs have increased significantly in the time since the RTP was last updated in 2018. That means there will be fewer total projects in the RTP across the region for this update. And from what I understand, that's, the inflation we've seen in the last couple of years is sort of unprecedented in recent history, but over time, the RTP kind of goes up and down in terms of the amount of revenue and projects in there. Next slide. So these are the eligibility criteria for inclusion in the RTP. Projects must be on the regional network. So what that means is they have to be on a map that Metro maintains, essentially, and they're not little local projects, they're projects of regional significance. They must be within the metropolitan planning area boundary, so we're not putting projects into the RTP that are outside of the urban growth boundary, for example. They must be in an adopted plan developed through a public process. So I want to just call that out specifically. We're not creating brand new projects here. We're taking projects from an adopted plan that went through significant public engagement, such as our transportation system plan, and moving those into the RDP. We're not creating new projects right now. Projects must be at least $2 million in size as the minimum threshold. And projects that increase capacity must be identified for modeling. This is going to be an important point for some of the larger agencies, ODOT in particular, that has much larger facilities. So if we're talking about freeway expansion projects, they'll have to be modeled, and that modeling will have to demonstrate that those projects are, well, it'll show whether projects are increasing or decreasing emissions is one of the big factors that Metro will be considering. Projects with committed funding but not yet complete must be included, and we have a couple of those examples here in the list. Next page, or next slide. So the process we followed to create and refine our draft project list followed these steps. So we removed completed projects. We revised project cost estimates with guidance from Metro and Washington County. We added and or modified projects for consistency with Tigard's 2040 TSP, Tigard's adopted capital improvement plan, and we put some projects on hold. Tonight I'll focus on our near, late, and strategic projects, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about any of the projects on the list that we provided. Next slide. So this is a table summary of the draft 2023 Tigard project cost list cost estimates. So you can see the revenue on the left-hand side for each of the different lists, and then our project totals on the right-hand side. And we have estimated cost in current dollars, and then we have estimated year of expenditure. That's a YOE dollar figure, and that's the midpoint of the near term and the late term time frames. So the escalation factors here, essentially how it worked is that a lot of the projects from the 2018 RTP just get carried over into the, in fact, that's the bulk of the projects in our list just get carried over because they haven't been completed yet. The cost estimate from 2018 was subject to a 40% inflation factor, so for 2023 dollars, and then the near-term year of expenditure was 11.4% above 2023, and then the late and strategic was 16.3% over 2023, just so you know the escalation factors there. Next slide. So the next three slides are the near-term, late-term, and strategic lists. You're not going to be able to read this on the screen. You'll have to refer to the packets. Obviously, you have the list in front of you. I'll just call out on these maybe the summary here. So for the near-term list from 2024 to 2030, there's 7 projects. Most of these projects are in our capital improvement plan already. They're already programmed. We have 3 new projects for the near term. Next slide. Late term, we have 11 projects total with 2 new ones. And the late term is 2031 to 2045. And again, these are the constrained lists here. Next slide. And then this is the strategic list. Total of 28 projects, 8 new ones. And again, the strategic is the unconstrained list. And this is for the time period of 2031 to 2045. Strategic projects are, they're important to capture because it's a demonstration of our priorities. They're projects that are in our transportation system plan, or they were already in the RTP. They're projects that we would like to do, but we don't have funding yet identified for those. And occasionally, you will have a new funding opportunity that arises, a new federal grant or a new state funding opportunity, and you would want to potentially pick one of these projects off of this list if it fits with some other priorities that you might have going on in the area, or you can combine projects for efficiency of scale and that sort of thing. Okay. Next slide. So next steps, I should note that next steps here, I'll go through these bullets. So as I mentioned, Tigard teammates are entering these projects into Metro's Project Hub. It's a web portal where we put all of these projects. And the deadline for that is February 17th. At its February 13th meeting, the Washington County Coordinating Committee will consider and recommend the Washington County lists and submit those to Metro. Washington County will submit those to Metro on their behalf. And so the list you have in front of you tonight is what Washington County and WCCC already have. It's already in the packet for the meeting on Monday. And then starting in late February, Metro will lead an assessment of draft RTP projects and engage with the policymakers and the public to gather feedback on the draft project list. Let's see, I included the project submission guide as an attachment to your packets, and unfortunately it was mislabeled. It should have been Exhibit 5, not Exhibit 1 on the document itself. And I should also acknowledge that this manual is not really critical for your understanding of the RTP process in general, but I erred on the side of providing more rather than less information for you to have, since this is the first time we've talked about the RTP with you. So I think I will leave it at that, and next slide is just discussion and questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. I think it's a fair assumption to assume this council likes more information rather than less. So let's open it up to questions that anybody has. I know there was robust questions that happened beforehand as the council packet was reviewed, but if you have additional questions, please bring them forward now. Yes, Councilor Rolfe.
Thank you, Mayor Lube, and thank you, Mr. Roth, for the exchange back and forth. And I guess it's more of a comment than a question. My sense is that waiting until May, I'm not sure there would be something to be gained. What I care about is the thoughtful process and the really, what seems like, I did, thank you, Assistant City Manager, for getting this for me, have spent a lot of time identifying and prioritizing the needs for the city. And so I just appreciate the thoughtfulness, and I guess I just don't have comments or questions that would delay an action this evening.
Yeah, Councilor Shaw.
There we go. Thank you. Excellent presentation, very thoughtful and very thorough, and appreciate the extra information as well. You had mentioned, I believe it was on slide 10, that projects with committed funding but not yet complete must be included. And I assume that the 3 new projects that are within the first tier category are examples of that funding that's already committed. And that would be looking at North Dakota, Fano Creek, as well as the Templeton, Tuolumne Safe Routes, as well as the downtown pedestrian improvements?
That's right.
Correct.
The one exception, the downtown pedestrian improvements does not, well, it has committed funding in the form of TIF. We can use
Correct.
TIF funding for that.
Okay.
It's not in the CIP yet, but on that specific project, just to provide a little clarity on that, that would support the type of improvements that we've seen Main Street, Green Street, the work that was on Burnham, to apply to other streets or other locations within downtown.
Okay, great. And with that too, similar to Councilor Wolf, I see no reason to not move forward with a recommendation and support the February 17th requested deadline.
If there's no additional questions in there, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the authorization of teammates take all actions necessary to complete step 1 and step 2 is described in the agenda item summary.
I'll second.
Deputy City Recorder Raimundo, please conduct a vote.
Council President Hu,
Yes.
Mayor Lube,
Yes.
Councilor Shaw,
Yes.
Councilor Singh,
Yes.
and Councilor Wolf.
Yes.
Thank you.
And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Roth.
Thanks.
Okay. Next on the agenda, we have climate adaptation and natural hazard mitigation. And yep, there we are. Thank you. Hello, Emergency Management Coordinator Mike Luke and Assistant City Manager Tritch.
Hi, good evening, Mayor, Council, and members of the Tigard community. I am your Assistant City Manager for Investment and Infrastructure, Emily Tritch. Our emergency coordinator, Mr. Lewick, was kind enough to let me say a few remarks to introduce this topic before I pass it over to him. I wanted to welcome you to this next chapter of our climate journey together. So far, we have talked a lot about climate mitigation in favor of our carbon neutrality goal. With this presentation, Mr. Lewick will be talking through an update as part of a regular regional natural hazard mitigation plan effort that Washington County undertakes periodically. I believe this is the 4th update in as many years. Mr. Lewick was invited to focus on the climate adaptation elements of this plan, but I want to point out that this plan is extensive. There's quite a bit more to it. The plan is in public comment right now, so I also want to invite members of our community to join the online open house. That is available at nhmp.washcoopenhouses.org. And that we'll make sure that link is available and prominent on our social media as well. Before I hand it off, I did want to underscore the focus on education, community education and education of our leaders. We heard this throughout the goal discussion, and I want you to be assured that this is going to be a theme that we carry throughout the climate focus area. And keep that in mind as you listen to this presentation. And thinking about climate, reducing our impact, and preparing for changing conditions, we're thinking about new ways to function. And so it does necessitate some thinking about how we operate, what our energy footprint looks like, and then how we can withstand exposure to different weather events and things that we might see an uptick in the frequency of those. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it off to Mr. Lewick, who's joining us remotely. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Mr. Lewick.
Nice to see you. Thank you, Assistant City Manager Trish. As mentioned, good evening. Sorry, I'm going to start this over again. Good evening, Mayor Lou, Council President Hu, Council, and City Manager Reimer. As mentioned, I'm Mike Lewick. I'm your City Emergency Management Coordinator. And next slide, please. For the next 10 or 15 minutes, I'd like to share an update on our natural hazard mitigation plan and summarize some of the current steps we are collectively taking to address the climate related hazards and the emergency management adaptation strategies that are part of Council Goal 3. I know your schedule is very tight. So in the interest of time, I'll move through my slides. There are only 5, and I can field any questions at the end if that works for you. To start off, I just wanted to kind of set the tone here. I asked 3 people to find the term mitigation for me, and I got 3 different answers. And all 3 are right in their own way. But in the context of emergency management, mitigation is defined for us, I believe, as any sustained action to reduce or eliminate long-term risks from our hazards. So we use our local plans and regulations at all levels to protect our structures, our infrastructure projects, natural systems, and provide mitigation education awareness programs as well. Next slide, please. On the slide, you have 10 of the identified natural hazards that Tigard has determined to be impactful for our jurisdiction. Those that have an asterisk next to them are the climate-related hazards, and the red font, extreme heat, was just added this year, just based on our last couple of years of record-breaking heat.
Excuse me, Mr. Lewick, I'm sorry. Can I ask Mr. Thornburg to jump ahead? Thank you very much. All right, continue, Mr. Lewick. Thank you.
I better be a little bit better about next slide, please, and I apologize. As you now carry the torch, our city officials back in 2008 recognized the benefits of us having a long-term all-hazard approach to mitigation hazards. The approach has been implemented through our natural hazard mitigation plan and our 5-year hazard mitigation plan updates that are required by rule and law. This has led us to a gradual decrease of the hazards associated impacts by building on risk reduction measures outlined in our previous iterations of the hazard mitigation plan. The city's involvement in the Washington County's natural hazard mitigation plan represents a collective effort of hazard mitigation steering committees, participating local technical team members, the public, and stakeholders. I want to share 3 different considerations that we use in this planning cycle related to climate adaptations and some of our risk action items that we are recommending. First is exposure. That's going to lower the frequency and the magnitude of the impact on a person or a population or system. Second is our sensitivity, which reduces the impact of that climate-related event on that person, the population, or that system. That is, if the event still is going to occur at the same or greater frequency and magnitude, but the person or the population or the system is affected by the event less than it was before the invention, if you will. And then adaptation capacity, which increases the capability of the person's populations or systems to manage the climate impact or realize an opportunity emerging from the climate change, including by transforming how and where they live. Tigard's developed our current addendum, Annex G, to the county's natural hazard mitigation plan in accordance with the Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000, the complete natural hazard mitigation plan. And our addendum identifies hazards and mechanisms to minimize those damage associated with these hazards as they occur in our geographical area of Tigard. Tigard's technical team committee utilized Oregon Emergency Management's hazard analysis methodology to examine hazard vulnerabilities, the probabilities by collecting information about history, probability, and vulnerability, and then the maximum threat for each of the hazards that impact the city. The methodology does not compare the hazard to each other or rank the hazard against each other. Instead, this process provides a sense of hazard priorities or relative risks that allows us comparison of the same hazard across the other participants in Washington County that are revising their plan at the same time. Public participation was offered to the community members to hear their voice and ideas, interests, and opinions about the hazards, how they affect them, and the best way to mitigate the impacts earlier in, I believe, July. And as the city implements the mitigation actions identified in our annex, there'll be additional opportunities. And as Assistant Manager Trish already mentioned, we opened up online open house for the plan review and for input to public and stakeholders. And that will be open till the 5th of March. Also, participants had an opportunity to take a survey and we collected information about the community's perception of the natural hazard mitigation priorities, and the steering and technical committee used those results and their risk assessment and mitigation strategies that we've developed today. 2 points I'd like to excuse me, highlight is changing climate is reflected in our natural hazard mitigation plan and other disaster preparedness planning efforts that are ongoing throughout the city. Integrating hazard mitigation into our local comprehensive plan establishes resilience as overarching value for our community. Hazard mitigation provides an opportunity for continuously managing and developing the way that we'll take care of the impacts and decrease the hazard and vulnerability to the city. Before a disaster, we work to develop all hazards, mitigation plans, and address the current and future risks, reducing possible impacts of climate change. In addition to the planning development, Tiger works hard to inform our community on specific priorities and strategies. Examples include risk analysis based on climate forecasting information, partnering, training and exercising support, and also seeking annual program money for capital improvement projects that would address some of our climate adaptation strategies. Even over the last 5 years, we've been impacted to more frequent and intense weather and climate incidents that has steered us to develop new strategies in this hazard mitigation plan update related to climate change. That includes specifics to climate adaptation or investments that we can make to prepare our community for extreme heat, cold, smoke, wildfire. Those are some of our new, or not new, but some of our focus priorities for this term. FEMA's National Risk Index and the 4th edition of the U.S. Climate Assessment offers information on assorted risks. Tiger's going to use those 2 climate adaptation resource tools to gain insight around current and future climate-based risks. Some of Tiger's hazard mitigation version 4 strategies include such efforts as natural-based solutions, which can significantly increase resiliency. The natural-based solutions will continue to be an important part of our community's risk reduction strategy and are cost-effective that help us in our success. The natural-based solutions include sustainable planning, design and environmental management, and engineering practices that weave natural features and processes into the built environment to promote adaptation and resilience. Such solutions enlist natural features and the process and efforts to combat climate change, reduce flood risk, improve our water quality, restore and protect our wetlands, stabilize our shorelines, and reduce urban heat. And also want to mention recreation and add recreational space and more. The next 3 slides are example of low, medium, and high priority adaptation strategies. Next slide, please. I want to take a minute just to clarify the 3 main pieces of a hazard mitigation action item. That is the type of action, the title, and the strategy priorities. All of the hazard mitigation action items are formatted the same, so it's easy to review and understand. This one specifically is addressing extreme heat, and the focus purpose is to reduce urban heat island effects. And then our strategy or flexible pathway priority is low, and I'll go through those just here in a second. And then the narrative on how we would go about mitigating that. Those types of actions, there's 4 of them that we use to classify, as you can see on this slide, plans and regulations and natural system protection is the type of action. We have local plans and regulations, structure and infrastructure protection, natural system protection, and public education and awareness programs. The strategy priorities are established. We use the STAPLE acronym, and that's social, technical, administrative, political, legal, economic, and environmental feasibilities. When we establish the priorities, a low priority is has 1 or 2 of these staple criteria. It's important to our jurisdiction, and it should be implemented, but it's going to be as funding becomes available. And that project timeline should be about 5 years or more. The mediums use 3 to 4 of those safety criteria. Also important to our jurisdiction, but not as urgent as the high. And the action items can be implemented long-term. Projected timelines for those are 2 to 5 years. And then our high has 5 or more of those safety criteria, which again is very important to our jurisdiction to implement. And there, if you will, are the lower hanging fruit and less resource intensive and cost effective for us to accomplish as soon as 2 years. Next slide, please. This slide represents a flood hazard, and the focus is to improve the flood risk. We're using plans and regulations to do that, and how would we do that to heighten awareness of our flood risk. Although we do it now, we do have some detailed improvements that could help us better prepare for things like that happened to Tualatin and even our community back in '96. And then next slide, please. Lastly, that this represents a high priority. We're addressing the winter storms, winter weather, risk awareness activities. We're using the public education action. And it's a high priority where we can produce and distribute family and traveler emergency preparedness information about severe weather using our emergency notification systems, also printed material, and then consider safety strategies on severe weather being implemented into potential driver education classes, and using, additionally educating our citizens on fuel burning, using corrective ventage, and encouraging our homeowners to install the monoxide monitors and alarms that we need in our homes. So that is the gist of my slides, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to share our efforts to mitigate natural hazards and the impacts of our city. through climate adaptation and partnering with sound strategies. I'm happy to answer any question that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Lewick. I have a question that I'll start with. You know, at the end, you talked a lot about education to our community, you know, around different things. And I guess it's also, kind of a question for Council President who works with Tigard CERT. Is there an opportunity for the partnership of leveraging that relationship to communicate with our community about some of these risks?
Great point, Mayor Lube. I just want to point out that we've always continued to have, even though the oversight for the CERT went away, that partnership and teamwork has continued with CERT. And unfortunately, the 3-year pause with the COVID has dampened our ability to do that, but we're kickstarting that again. We're partnering again this summer, July 21st, down at Cook Park for our 10th annual Community Preparedness Fair, where we'll get some of these words out, and we'll continue to use CERT as a force multiplier for sharing the information that we need to help the community.
Great, thank you. Are there other questions? Yes, Council President Hu.
I'm just wondering, going back to the slide, to the identify risk. Yeah, that one. So I was wondering why landslides and wildfire and smokes are not climate-related hazards. I'm just curious.
They all could be somewhat attached to climate hazards, but the landslides are typically associated with heavy rains and wildfire. The wildfire and smoke is from lightnings. So, in fact, all of them could somehow, with the exception of probably the volcanic ash, could be associated with, and dam failure could be associated with climate. But we chose those 5. Doesn't mean that our focus is any less than the rest of the 9 that are that you see on screen.
Yeah, that was my follow-up question, so thank you for answering that.
You bet.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Lewick, for the presentation. Just for some of our community members who are listening and watching and may not know on slides 3, 4, and 5 what EHFL and WS stand for, would you mind letting us know what that stands for? And then I had a question about timing and next steps.
Absolutely. I apologize. EH, extreme heat, FL, flood, EQ, earthquake, LS, landslide. And if we were to go back to the hazard slide, all I do is use the representing pieces of either the hazard itself or kind of tie them together. And that's how our emergency operations plan is identified in the hazard annexes as well.
Great, thank you.
If that helps.
Perhaps one other question just about timing. Under next steps, it talks about very early in 2023, which seems like we're there now, that we are going to be, you'll be seeking formal adoption coming back to us, but yet above there's a very robust time frame that starts February through February 27th, March through May, June through July, September through December. So just curious if there's some, just for me, clarification on what timing you're looking at for meetings and approval.
Thank you. Councilor Shaw. So those timelines were addressed during the project, and those were what we hoped to have. With any project, sometimes there's a little bit of a stumble or pause, and the contractor has got everything squared away now, and we're currently in the public comment period for 30 days. So after March, there'll be probably about a 3-week review of the comments, and any recommendations will be entertained for changes in the draft. Once those drafts done, Oregon Emergency Management is currently reviewing the document in its current form to make sure that we're doing everything we are supposed to within the standards of the plan. And then after that 3 to 4 week period, somewhere around April, we'll get the green light from Oregon Emergency Management to take it to our council for approval. And so in that meantime, I will continue to make sure that the plan is where it needs to be. So as soon as I get the word, I will get a placeholder on council's agenda to bring it back and give you a chance to review it again for any of those changes that we may have made, and then seek adoption.
Yes.
Thank you. If I may respond, in the agenda information sheet, there were a number of dates listed that described the plan development. It was meant to indicate 2022, and that was for the Phase 4 update, and then Mr. Lewick described the upcoming dates. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I thought it might have been 2022, but it wasn't clear, so I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Yeah, Councilor Singh.
About, I had a question about the steering and technical committees and who is that composed of specifically?
So each of the jurisdictions had a lead, and typically that was their emergency manager. And so the steering committees made up of all the participating jurisdictions: Hillsborough, Beaverton, Tigard, Clean Water Services, TVWD, and another not a jurisdiction, but another entity that is escaping me right now. So that's the makeup of the steering committee. The technical committee was made up of teammates representing all the departments within the city, planners, police, emergency management, public works, infrastructure, and GIS. Those folks sat in a series of meetings and then were provided homework to help shepherd the plan as it sits today through the process of the last 12 months.
Great, thank you.
Are there any additional questions? No? Thank you so much, Mr. Lewick. We appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.
We have no non-agenda items tonight, and so we will move on to an administrative report from City Manager Reimer.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, good evening, Mayor, councilors, members of the community, and my teammates. One, just a quick thanks and congrats on a great City Council goal-setting events that you had a couple weeks ago. It's been referenced a couple times already, and we're working on bringing that back to you after we have the final document. One thing that came out of the conversations later was talking about revising some of our processes for public comment when you get supplemental information. And we shared with you that we would initiate that next week. We had a comment by one of your colleagues, Councilor Wolf, about extending that a couple weeks to make sure that the public is aware of the change in the cutoff time for public comment, and we thought that was a good idea. So we just wanted to let you know that we won't initiate it next week, but the first week, or the first meeting in March, we'll have that in place. In the meantime, Jesse and Carol will work on having that advertised so the community is aware that it's coming, and that'll be a different time in the next few weeks. So thanks for bringing that to our attention, and I think it falls right in line with what you're trying to do in engaging in communicating with our community. So that's just a quick housekeeping item. Just a few key things from our teammates. Our first Safe Routes to School program, which you know is really flourishing and taking off with our partners. Our first official winter walk and roll is actually tomorrow. And so we are encouraging everyone to walk, roll, or bus to school, as it says in here, to win cool prizes. And so that is an event that's been successful in the past, and we'd expect it to continue to be successful as we move forward. In the same lines of encouraging our students and families to be safe, we're also now working on our Vision Zero Transportation Safety Action Plan. This is a result of a collaborative effort that we had with our county, Metro, East Multnomah County, to apply for a grant of $2.4 million, of which I believe we're receiving $300,000. It'll give us an effort. Our effort will then be to start focusing on Vision Zero, which will be a key component of the safety and the things that we've been talking about at your advance, as well as many other places. And so kudos to the team for working with our partners to, one, get the grant, and then to work collaboratively to move the region forward, as well as Tigard specifically. As you know, it's tax time, and so thanks to our library for being home to our volunteers that help our community members. So far, we're aware of over 330 members have signed up for that service that runs through April 15th, and so we'd expect many more, but you can see the immediate response to getting that help. So another, as we try to do every month, just great examples of how we're serving the community in ways people may not always see. As part of Black History Month, we're celebrating that. We have a book list at the library as well for children and adults, and so we encourage people to stop by the library and look at some of those items, as well as many others that we have there that really celebrate our community and the diversity throughout. And the last one is continuing to bridge the digital divide in every way that we can. The library has added 6 more hotspots, and so we now have 22 Wi-Fi hotspots in addition to the 11 Wi-Fi hotspots and Chromebooks that can be checked out. So just one more step as we keep looking at ways of addressing that and helping those that really need access to information that many of us may take for granted. So that concludes my remarks, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Shaw?
Maybe not a question, but I also heard we had some good news that the city of Tigard had won a $105,000 grant for e-bike library program. That was through the PG&E Drive Change program.
Yep, through PG&E. Yep, I believe that's one that's helping with our e-bikes at 2 affordable housing sites. Yep, absolutely. Yep. Yeah,
Great.
And kudos to the team. It's a couple members are here right now, and others. We're very active, right, in trying to work regionally, partnering with others, and just finding where there's opportunities for those funds. And it's not just funds for fun's sake, right? It's funds so we can really affect change through those. And this is another great example. So kudos to the team on that.
Yeah, ditto, kudos to the team.
Thank you so much for your update. Seeing no other questions, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Will Deputy City Recorder Raimundo conduct a roll call vote, please?
Council President Hu?
Yes.
Mayor Lube?
Yes.
Councillor Shaw?
Yes.
Councillor Singh?
Yes.
And Councillor Wolf?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tigard. Have a wonderful night.